I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. As always, we promise what I call robust conversations, and I'm very sure we're going to be delivering on that today, as we always do. But first, let me invite you to support this program. We've just gone north of 608, I think, subscribers. We're trying to get to 1,000. And if you're listening or you know somebody that vibes with the content we create on the conversation, let them know to check in, to like, share, support. We want to get to where we have 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible, and it begins with you. And for my guest today, by all means, please subscribe, and please tell your subscribers, your friends, and your contacts to subscribe to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. You do that by going to YouTube /Insight News MN. That's our YouTube channel. By the way, though, we're streaming on our own Insight News YouTube channel. We also are streaming to the Black Press of America at Black Press USA, their YouTube channel. We're also streaming to Twitter, to Facebook, and to LinkedIn. So there are a variety of ways to connect with us. The beauty of this all, the principle behind it, is that at the end of the day, our flagship is still the newspaper, Insight News. And these interviews are what we do as reporters, talking to interesting people about interesting things that matter in our lives, in our community, our culture. And our objective here is to share the interview experience with you. You get to connect with me and my colleagues interviewing newsmakers, people who are making things happen in community. And then you also will be able to see the reports that my team writes and publishes in Insight News and at insightnews.com as a result of these robust conversations. Well, today, at the second part of the show, I'm talking to a couple of colleagues, friends, young elders, leaders in the community who have been regular visitors here, always down with the issues. Brother Thomas Berry and Brother Nick Muhammad are here talking about the recent dismissal of the Minneapolis Civil Rights Director. The headlines in the daily paper said the Minneapolis Civil Rights Director fired. We'll get the background on that and talk about that at the bottom half of the hour. But we begin with an interview with a friend, a new friend, and my colleague, W.D. Foster Graham, who's the book's editor and an author. But W.D., good afternoon. Good to see you, man. How are you?
Good afternoon, Al. Great to be here one more time. Just coming
Absolutely.
off open mic night.
Absolutely. Well, before we bring in Brother James Darnell Johnson, you gave me some good news. And I think you should share that you've moved your activity into the entrepreneurial range with the creation of a new company. You want to give that announcement as challenge your company?
Well, thank you. I am now the president of my own company, which is Kuumba Mashoka Incorporated. It is a literary company that will incorporate my novels, my book reviews, as well as speaking. And the goal is to continue to support and uplift Black authors and poets in this diaspora. And part of that was inspired by a conversation that you had, I think it was last November or so, about as we support Black authors, Black newspapers, Black books.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm about.
Yeah, well, you do a great job. And this is really a wonderful convening that you and I do, where we reach out to authors around the country, even around the world, and talk about our ideas, our analyses, our take on what's happening in the context of our history and our lived experiences, and also with an eye towards our vision of what the world can be and should be, and what we are committed to building in the world as we move forward. Well, today we've got, again, Brother James Darnell Johnson. He's an author and a native of South Minneapolis. He's a storyteller, and he loves to tell stories from the African-American experience that put culture at the center. His style is both creative and fun. He helps the reader the readers being both children and adults, to vividly engage with the characters, their emotions, and their story. He's got a master's degree in organizational management from Concordia University in St. Paul. He's a Bush Leadership Fellow, and that opportunity gave him the time to travel to Ghana, West Africa, and to learn about the culture. He's got over 30 years of experience working in social services, primarily in the fields of child protection, juvenile justice, and runaway and homelessness. 10 of those years, he worked in African-American culture-specific programs as an emergency shelter and group home program director. Whether he's portraying Malcolm X on his birthday, or performing a Black History rap, or teaching Kwanzaa to elementary school students, or engaged in other supportive endeavors, Jay Darnell has spent a lifelong career serving our community. Currently, he lives with his wife in Burnsville. He's a supervisor of workforce development at Goodwill Easter Seals, the Father Project, and he educates and empowers dads to be better fathers. We're talking about his new book. I think the new book is called The Supreme Hogan. Brother Jay Darnell, good to see you, man.
Good to see you too, Al. I'm glad to be with you this afternoon.
And as always, WD, thanks for making these important conversations happen. Why don't we jump right in and you talk about the Supreme Hogan, give us the background, the story, and what do people discover as they get into this piece of literature that you've created.
All right. So this is my book, The Supreme Hogan, and it's my first young adult novella. And so The Supreme Hogan, really what I want to do was highlight the people of Mali, West Africa, and specifically the Dogon people from the Dogon tribe in West Africa. And the Hogan is a shaman and the elder of that particular community in Africa. And so what it starts off with is that astrophysicist Tony Smart is being interviewed by Oprah Winfrey. And he's telling a fantastic story about how he came and encountered the Supreme Hogan. And so his nephew, T, who was 18, was telling him after he had experienced him. And so when Tony heard the story, he said, this can't be possible. This guy can't be that powerful and all the different things that he can do. And so he said, I'm going to go to Mali to expose this guy as a fraud, as a fake. And so he went over to Mali and met him. And he actually became fond of the Supreme Hogan. And he performed all these different feats. And one of the most impressive things that he did was that he was able to, he showed him that he could see the universe without the use of a telescope. And so he was pointing out all these celestial objects, and it blew Tony Smart's mind. And so he said, I wonder, would you be willing to come over to America and compete with the Hubble Space Telescope? Now, this is back in 1995. And so he reluctantly agreed, but he did agree to come. And it flows into some other fantastic stuff that happens once he comes to America. And so I also, I wrote the book, The Supreme Hogan, but I also have a companion book, which is really essentially the same book. But the second book that I wrote has text at the Act 1, and then Act 2 is a comic book. And so I thought I'd do something a little different that people weren't used to seeing. But those people who are into comic books, they really enjoy reading it because they're like, this is exactly what I like to see Black people in comics. And so I was excited about that. And I just want to read a couple pages
Sure, please.
From my book, Supreme Hogan. And in context, this is when Tony Smart's nephew, T, is telling him about his experience when he encountered the Supreme Hogan. T cracked a half grin. What is the man's name? I asked. And I is Tony. And borrow, but he calls himself the Supreme Hogan. He is a mystery even to his own people. I thought it was some cheap circus trick, but I saw with my eyes and ears and believed him. He liked me too. I asked, what did he charge? Only cola nuts. That's it, cola nuts? That's right. And Uncle Tony, the whole village, well, the older people are some of Earth's most wise and intelligent people. Similar to the Egyptian pyramids, markings and symbols were etched all over the compound's walls. I saw drawings of circles dividing. Mitosis, I questioned, preposterous. Symbols of the double helix of DNA. Genetics, that's absurd, I shouted. T continued. There were diagrams of orbits of the sun, the planets, their moons, and what looked like vibrating strings. String theory, outrageous. I told you the Supreme Hogan has mad skills. And I told you, cut the Ebonics vernacular. But Uncle Tony, the Dogon were rapping about the universe and how it was created from the big burst. The Big Bang, time, and creation? Right. Now that's ridiculous. Indeed, I have even saw a carving of what looked like electrons orbiting a nucleus. Quantum mechanics? Now that's laughable. I said with a chuckle. I took a sip of beer and asked, you mean to tell me you believe a peasant farming, ditch digging, chicken neck wringing African knows all these things? Yes, Tony said with a very stern look. They have no business knowing any of this, I shouted in disgust. You know, T said, that's what the MIT professor from back in the day said about them exactly, too, and he was also wrong. Well, it's true, I said with disdain. People who still live in the Stone Age, living on mountains and cliffs, isolated from the real world, could not have known this. But wait a minute, I paused. I remember hearing about the Dogon, knowing about the Sirian star system and 4 moons of Jupiter, but I always thought the real scientists debunked it.
Wow. Well, I love it. I love it. That's great. When did you write this, and what was going through your mind? What was driving you to spin the story, to bring the story to life?
It was, Al, back in the late 80s, I read a book that was edited by Ivan Van Sertima.
Uh-huh.
And it's called Blacks in Science, Ancient and Modern. Mm-hmm. And that's when I got introduced to the Dogon people and all the fantastic things that they're able to do, and they still don't understand how they did it. Mm-hmm. And so I just said, that is so impressive, because it's an African people who people think are just primitive people, but they're able to show the different technologies that they have through writings and drawings and discussions. It's like, are they really aliens? Did they get educated by aliens? That's what some of the ancient astronomer physicists say. Mm-hmm. Where did you guys get this knowledge from? And they can't figure out how they were able to do all of that. And so as I was thinking about them throughout my time, and I wrote my first novella, it was called The Opening. I had a piece of them in there, but I called them Planet Hawks. Mm-hmm. And so I always had that imagery of them being able to do all these fantastical things. And I thought it would be a good story to write.
Well, take a minute and give the elevator version of the description of the Dogon people. Why are they known, and why is what they have done and what they continue to do so important? And why is it still hidden from much of the world?
And every now and then someone would say, oh, this must be one of the Dogon people. A lot of people don't know about them because some of them look at them as a fake. Mm-hmm. This is not true. There's no way possible they could have even known about, the 4 Jupiters, a moon, about the star Sirius, and that it had a companion star called Sirius B. They're saying, how in the world could they do that? They don't have any telescopes. They don't have any real writing systems, quote unquote. And so it's something that you see sometimes in documentaries where everybody's just trying to figure out how can they possibly know how to do this. Mm-hmm. And African people running around with just shorts on. You know, how did they understand all of this technical information? And so that's why that was kind of the impetus for writing it.
And so when you went to Ghana, I was pleased. We may have talked about this before, but tell me again about your experiences in Ghana. What was the occasion that brought you to Ghana, and what was the Ghana experience? And how did that help inform your writing and this project in particular? If this came before this project, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it did. Mm-hmm. And it's funny you should mention that, because when I was talking to the people in Ghana about the Dogon in Mali, mm-hmm. and they just looked at me and said, "What? You mm-hmm. heard of the Dogon people? That's impressive." They were really happy. I was able to bond with them once I introduced myself as, having knowledge of the Dogon people in Mali. Mm-hmm. And over there, they were just like brothers and sisters here in the United States. Mm-hmm. Warm, welcoming. They could have been your cousin. They could have been your uncle. They could have been your grandparents. And they just had such a community feel to it that it just made you feel at peace.
Where all did you go in Ghana? Accra? Did you go up to Cape Coast or to Mali or to
Cape Coast
or Kumasi? Did you make all those?
Yeah, Kumasi. Yep. All of those went to the slave dungeons, mm-hmm. And experienced that door of no return, mm-hmm. Where I cried mm-hmm. and just sat there and just looked at the walls, and the walls seemed to be talking to me about the experiences mm-hmm. from the, waiting for the slave ship to come, mm-hmm. and, the smells of some of the excrement that was still mm-hmm. inside. Mm-hmm. And once you left that door, you're never coming back. Mm-hmm. And you're heading to the Americas. And that was just a powerful time. And the people were so knowledgeable about that history, and they pride themselves on being part of the African Americans in the United States, because a lot of us came from West Africa.
Mm-hmm. Many. Have you been to Africa yet, W.D.?
I have not been there, not yet.
Okay.
But I do know this. I know that my father traced part of my ancestry back to Ghana, and on my mother's side is traced back to Nigeria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that pretty much mirrors mine. My mother's side is Nigeria, 99% Yoruba. And then my father's side, a combination of Ghana, but also into Europe, which is, I suppose, where the slave name came from, So listen, well, I'm loving that you are meditating and writing. And I'd say as a novelist, you're probably also what's the right word for it? Writing almost in a prophetic voice, imagining what can and should unfold. Does that make sense to you? Does that apply to you?
Yeah. Afrofuturism is what it is. Mm-hmm. If you have an imagination, it's no telling how far you can go, mm-hmm. but you have to be able to see it. And so when I write, I paint a picture in my mind mm-hmm. of kind of how I want the story to go, and how I want the characters to be placed in it, and how the arc of the story goes from beginning, middle to end. Mm-hmm. And how in the end people read my books and they go, I got so much more educated than I ever could have. I could see, not only just feel, but I could see the characters moving in the book.
Mm-hmm. Who do you read? Who are you enjoying of late? What are you reading right now, for example? And then what have you read in the past couple of years that really, gets you fired up and makes you want to quote them, and makes you also compare your approach to their approach?
It's always Octavia Butler.
Octavia Butler, of course.
Yeah, Octavia Butler. And she died. She left us too soon. Mm-hmm. But I had the opportunity to meet her when she came to the Twin Cities. And I was just telling her about how much I was so impressed with her social justice writing. But she had ideals about female leads in her books that just kind of took me to another level of understanding, because she was always fighting against injustice.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way she just wrote it and the way she used time travel to create scenery is just so special. It just made me want to write just like her.
So my question, Brother Darnell and W, jump in here too.
Mhm.
How do we, with intention, create a script that is composed, write a future, plan? Writing is planning, right? And imagining, but documenting and setting forth what we've imagined. How do we, through our literature and other tools, ensure that our bid for freedom and equity and justice is not only imminent, but also inevitable? What do you think?
I just think that when you create something, it can always build upon something else.
Mm-hmm.
And we always know that someone you've experienced so much that you don't even necessarily know where you get the ideas from,
Mhm.
but you have a life, you have a history, and you have experience. And then it just pops into your mind and it just builds on top of one another. And it takes you to places that you never thought you'd be able to go to. And other people piggyback on your story.
Mm-hmm.
And
that
maybe not even necessarily knowing that they are, but they just may have heard it. And then it kind of gathers steam and other people start writing it somewhat, close to the genre that you're writing in. And then it kind of takes, sometimes they turn it into something else. Like I've done in some of my books. I've heard a story before and I turned it into something else, and I turned it into something that's more culturally appropriate for African Americans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And voila, you have it.
Here it is. WD, what do you think?
Well, I think that's also true because I have a prime example of that. Last week, I did a tour of the Givens collection at the University of Minnesota Elmer Anderson Library, and just of the materials I read, yeah, this is what we ourselves today were doing on those who came before us. Because for example, I read a poem from Phyllis Wheatley's collection of poems, and it was the first book published written by an African American. And then you see some books from the Harlem Renaissance, and also periodicals from the Black Panther Party and stuff. And you see how in some ways we may not be conscious of it, but in certain ways we as writers and wordsmiths have built upon that history.
That's awesome. Another book you're working on, or a new book you got, or other books you have, Brother Johnson?
Yes, sir. I also got this new journal hot off the press. It's called Chopping It Up with Queen Azina and Black Girl Magic.
Wow.
And so what happens is I have Queen Azina in some of my past stories. Mm-hmm. And so I created that character out of a similar character that was developed in West Africa called Azina. And Queen Azina is the queen of the Aziza people. She's a butterfly lady. She's real tiny, but she's real beautiful and she's real powerful. Mm. And she can make a lot of good things happen out of bad situations. And so I added in Black Girl Magic, which is new characters. And I named them after my two granddaughters, Talia and Amani. And so I'm calling them Black Girl Magic. And I just want to read a little bit out of this journal, which is a voter suppression and voting rights journal for Black people. Mm-hmm. And this is a journal for teens. And so this is Queen Azina, who was asking Talia and Amani about why they call Black Girl Magic. Azina, hello, Talia and Amani. Put your phone in your purse or your pocket and put it on silent so you won't be tempted to answer. Let me introduce myself. I am Queen Azina, Queen of the Aziza people. I want to welcome you to my lair. Talia, Lair, you mean Ant Mound, don't you? Ha ha ha. Oh, that's right. You live here. Azina, Talia, I see you got jokes. Anyway, I want to talk to you about a more serious subject. It's called voter suppression. So girls, why do you call yourself Black Girl Magic? Amani, first, all jokes aside, Talia, I want to say that we are honored to be with you, Queen, and chopping it up at the Ant Mound. But to answer your question, we want to show you that our beauty is untouched, our swag is too much, and our thoughts are too rough. Our skin is brilliant with melanin, and our legacy is filled with dopeness. Azina, phenomenal woman, that's you. No, Black Girl Magic, that's us. Talia, I'll give it a shot. We are sisters born from the same mother, but different fathers, drinking from the fountain of purity and eating knowledge and spitting out wisdom. We are beauty, power, and resistance, all rolled into one. The sum of us is more than any of us. Our unity is in our Black Girl Magic. It is our superpower. All Black girls have it.
Amazing, wonderful, man. Great, great, great. Well, how do people get your books? Where do they buy them?
They can go to my website.
Mm-hmm.
And my website is jdarnelljohnson.com.
Okay. We got to put that up here. Yeah. Is it on there? And a shout out to my friend who's with us almost every program from out east, Cameron. Cameron, so good to see you. And thank you for your support and for reading or watching the program faithfully. Appreciate you so much. So there we go. Let's WD, any final comments here for this section?
Well, for this section, I'd like to also let our viewers know that we have 2 literary events coming up on this weekend. For Saturday, September 24th, that you will be able to meet James Johnson at those events.
Not September 24th.
Excuse me, February 24th. Excuse me, my bad. I'm sorry. February 24th. Okay, the first one is being sponsored by the Minnesota Black Authors Expo. It'll be at the Brooklyn Park Library, located at 8500 West Broadway in Brooklyn Park from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. And the theme is bringing books to life for Black History Month. The second event will be sponsored by St. Peter's AME, and the theme is We Are Wordsmiths, and that will be, again, Saturday, February 24th at St. Peter's AME Church, located at 401 East 41st Street in Minneapolis from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., and you'll get to meet a variety of authors and poets from diverse genres. Hey, come out, meet, greet, and support our awesome wordsmiths.
Awesome. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Listen, stick around, guys. We're going to turn the conversation to our next guest. And before that, we'll take a quick break and come back and bring in Brother Nick Muhammad and talk about the issue I mentioned earlier. Nick Muhammad is going to be talking about the firing of the Minneapolis Civil Rights Director. And Nick is joined by his colleague, our friend, Thomas Berry, as well. We'll be right back in a second. Are you or someone you know recovering financially from the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown, or any other reason? If so, help is available. FindHelp.org is a site to find a wide range of resources, including food, medical care, and more. The best part is based on your zip code. Visit FindHelp.org, enter your zip code and the service you need. You'll get a map directing you to the organizations that can help you. Help is waiting at FindHelp.org. If you need help starting anew, FindHelp.org is the site for you. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome back to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. And Thomas Berry and Nick Muhammad are joining me now to talk about a news item. I've got a couple of background pieces here. An article in the Tribune entitled Minneapolis Civil Rights Director Fired. I think it was published a couple of days ago, reports that the firing of Civil Rights Director Alberder Gillespie due to her deemed quote unquote immediate threat to the city's ability to reform policing, according to a court-approved settlement. Mayor Jacob Fry, upon recommendation from the city operations officer, Margaret Anderson Keller, terminated Gillespie's appointment. And the decision stemmed from Gillespie's alleged failure to address complaints of police conduct promptly, as required by the settlement following the 2020 murder of George Floyd. Gillespie's conduct, described as uncooperative and obstructionist, led to a backlog of cases within the Office of Police Conduct Review. Critics of the city's oversight process expressed vindication, citing longstanding concerns about accountability and transparency. Gillespie's tenure, which began in November of 2021, ended abruptly, affecting the city's efforts to address policing issues. Well, Nick and Thomas, why don't we have you guys unpack this? What's the story behind the story? Brother Thomas, let me leave with you.
Well, I'll tell you the story behind the story. Well, first, thank you, brother, for having us on. And kudos to those brothers in the previous segment. We need more children reading. We definitely need higher reading scores around the country when it comes to our youth. So kudos to them. But to the city, I want to say that the story I almost read is one of the fictional books that Brother James state that he writes. If you know anything about Sister Gillespie, we know that she is a champion of her people. And when it comes to dealing with accountability from the police department, she would be the person that would hold up the process. One of the things that I find appalling in this entire thing is this is the fifth Black, public servant that this mayor has embarrassed publicly inside of the newspaper. He reprimanded Chief Arredondo. That's what led to him leaving. He reprimanded Dr. Cedric, what's the brother's last name? He reprimanded him for Cedric Alexander for some things that he stated online. He's also called not Congress, but City Council member Robin Walmsley, a liar in the public. And then here we have Taisha Green last year with the Black Expo, right? Remember they made her a scapegoat of all of these things. And then here we have Alberder Gillespie. Now, the irony is that if you take Taisha Green and you take Sister Gillespie, they both have been reprimanded during Black History Month. And they are being told that they are withholding or standing in the way of progress that will benefit their people. Now, the irony of that is that I personally have been in meetings with the mayor to watch him lie, to state that he didn't know who's in charge of internal affairs, to go down the hallway to run into Sister Walmsley, who told me no, it's a strong mayoral system. He is now in charge of internal affairs. So when he said that he didn't know who would be in charge of reprimanding the current police chief for lying about being in the interview process with Officer Timberlake, who had been fired from the West Virginia police precinct, the mayor flat out lied. Now, Alberta was not inside of that meeting. Alberta didn't hire Officer Farley, who stepped down right after the Timberlake situation because he said he had a spotted fast. And you know what he was hired to do? He was hired to review citizen complaints about police officers. Now, I don't know about anyone, but if I had a kid that suffered with stuffing his face with cake, I don't know if I would put that kid in charge of watching the bakery while everyone else is gone. And then blame someone else for being, obstructionist. It doesn't seem like Alberta was obstructing them of anything. And what I've heard for some of the people inside of her camp was the main thing was Sister Alberta was standing in the way of giving public information from complaints that citizens were making about the police. She was not going to turn over those names to some of the folks who are police friendly and breach that firewall between the citizens and the police department. She was doing her job. She wasn't obstructing from anything. She was just doing her job. And one last point before Brother Muhammad gets in here. They say the lie travels around the world 10 times before the truth gets out of bed. Part of the problem with Jacob Fry is he's been able to tell many lies on our community. And one thing, Jacob, which you kind of forget is when everyone else wanted your head after George Floyd, it was our community who stood pat with you. We stood pat with you because of Chief Arredondo. Had we known that you were going to throw the chief up under the bus, we wouldn't have stood pat with you. Had we known that we would be here with Sister Gillespie, we would not have stood pat with you. What you are doing, and is what I've said plenty of times, you are an illusionist. You give the illusion as if you want to give progress, that you are about progressive things, but the reality of it is it's the same old same.
Brother Nick?
Yes, thank you, Brother Al or Elder Al, for having us on the program. And to add on to Brother Barry's assessment, I found it interesting when I was reading the article that was put forth in the media that the person taking the credit for leading the charge of removing Sister Gillespie was Margaret Addison Kelleher. And that struck me as odd. I was like, what is a former state representative who retired? Now that I thought about it, like, why is she all of a sudden popping up back in Minneapolis politics? And more importantly, targeting the head of the Civil Rights Department. And before I get into that strange coincidence, I just want to speak on the character of Sister Gillespie and how inspired I was. And to Thomas's point, I thought that Mayor Jacob Fry was headed in a new direction with her appointment. Her reputation in the community was that of one that was uncompromising in the face of injustice facing the Black community. Also knew of her from Black Women Rising and pushing for Black women to be represented inside of government, so much so that she orchestrated, I think it was almost 24 Black women to run for public office in one election cycle across the state. And did so with the utmost integrity, including herself leading the charge and making sure that she backed several movements, one around reparative justice reform, reparations work, Black family advocacy, African American Family Preservation Act, and more. So it was odd that, this person, a leader who literally has made her sharpen her teeth on making sure that she kept integrity intact when it came to racial disparities and advocating for fair and equal and equitable treatment of the Black community, particularly at every level of government that she's engaged in. It was odd that she was removed. Then I looked at what they cited as the catalyst for her removal. And a lot of people that don't work in government, when they want to get rid of someone who's quote unquote a troublemaker, what that usually means is that, the utility of what got them hired, the buzzword of making sure that you look a certain way by aligning yourself with people who have a certain amount of credibility in the community. When that begins to fade and it's time to get back to business as usual, and there's some things that need to happen, but the people who have a certain dedication to an idea of justice, people who have their eye on the ball and understand what needs to happen, if they don't cooperate, they become targets. And that's what this felt like. When they cited that there was, several hundred cases that she needed to have processed, and at the end of the day, only 15 were processed. She's the director, number one. Number two, where was her support and infrastructure, and why was her staffing so small?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, there was over 1,000 cases in 2020 alone after COVID and after the murder of George Floyd. And so they were inundated, they were swamped. And so they never received the type of infrastructure and support for resources and staff expansion that I know some of the comparable departments have received. And yet they were asked to work miracles with, shoestring budgets and skeleton crews. And they do this all too often. Now, the irony of Margaret Ellison Kelleher laying her out to dry was kind of shocking to me, because when I seen her pop up in the administration, I was saying to myself, like Thomas said, when we first heard about Jacob Fry, there was all of this progressive forward movement and we're going to do things differently. So when she popped up, I was like, she is establishment, protocol. Like, she is the establishment. She's the old school, blue dog, pseudo racist Democrat, trying to be Minnesota nice prototype. So how did she end up inside of such a progressive young administrative mayor's administration? So when I seen that, I was like, oh, okay. we've moved beyond trying to appear like we're, progressing in a new direction. And so when this whole ordeal began to roll out, I find it ironic that not only did they fire the first Black woman I've known to head over that department for the city of Minneapolis, but they also fired John K. Jeffries in the same day. So a Black man and a Black woman over the civil rights department in the same day from a
What
woman.
was Dante's role? What was his role?
He was he oversaw the police conduct board.
Okay.
So he was supposed to be a part of making sure that certain protocols were taken care of it during as a result of the settlement, and making sure that certain trainings and things that were supposed to happen with these officers took place. However, what Sister Gillespie understands is that the root of this problem goes far beyond a training. And so she was not willing to just sit and act as if you check this box off, problem solved. We have one of the most vile police departments in the country, so much so that it took us, offering an astronomical salary to get anybody to even act as the interim chief of police, let alone want to take on the realities of that position. She understood this. So for them to boil what is necessary in the city down to a couple of reports, it just shows the racial disconnect of the people who are in charge of pushing her out of the way. And I think Jacob Fry would do well to, re-examine this. I don't think that, once you spit in our face, you're not going to be able to just clean that up. But I think there's a lot to be understood about what we're looking at and who we think certain leadership is based on the people that they're bringing in to represent the community. And we'll start there.
And so where were her and how have her allies on city council showed up? The city council is a unique, in a unique place right now, I think. Take a minute to dive into how you describe Minneapolis City Council, number one, and how this particular incident, if at all, touches or is touched by the leadership at City Council, the progressive leadership.
Well, I'm going to do something different. Typically, I just throw them under the bus, but today I'm going to say they got potential, but they have to mature. They have to move beyond the self-gratification and ideas of their own, and they have to think about the broader city and families in the city. That's the only way to sustain a city, not think about the individuals in the cities, but think about the families. And I think maybe a few of them, I heard that Robin Walmsley is running something for Sister Gillespie next week where people will be able to come out and speak on her behalf. But we haven't heard much from the other members of the city council. And brother, I want to say that I'm always appalled when I see Black folks being mischaracterized and other Black folks sit back and be quiet. Mm-hmm. That to me allows me to understand who you are as a leader. Because all Black folk who are in leadership roles, our job is always to speak truth to power. We're not supposed to go along to get along. We're not supposed to be, even if I have a disagreement with another Black leader, I'm never going to allow them to be thrown up under the bus so that we can continue white supremacy. And I think the city council, as well as Black leadership across the board throughout the Twin Cities, we've wasted the George Floyd moment. And this is what we're dealing with now. They're thinking that everybody's turned their eye to it all. As Nick stated, they're cleaning house. All of the DEI positions, that's diversity, equity, inclusions, they're doing away with those positions. What they're trying to go back to is pre-George Floyd. They want to go back to busting heads. If you think that's not the truth, ask yourself, why would they hire Officer Timberlake to begin with? If the West Virginia Police Department said that, hey, man, you're too rough, you're too vile, you're too racist, we don't want you here, why would the city of Minneapolis say, come on down, you're the next contestant on The Price is Right?
And according to him, he told him who he was.
He told him exactly who he was inside of the interview. And then here's the other thing that a lot of people may be sleeping on in this situation with Sister Gillespie. This also takes the headlines off of Mayor Fry again, because just 2 weeks ago, we just had the story about the young brother in the county who died a few years ago. And what did they do with that deputy that watched that young man die on the floor? They hired him as a police officer. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Brother Al, Brother Nick. Isn't there a young man currently in prison today for watching George Floyd be suffocated to death? Now, if you were trying to change, why would you hire a deputy who saw that inside of the county? Why would you hire him to your police force? They are trying to go back to the original police force. They want more head busters in charge. That's why they wanted fairly to be over the citizen complaint. Why would you have an officer who has a long rap sheet of citizen complaints over citizens complaining? Unless you're trying to go back to your Gestapo tactics. And one last point, because I know Amelia Hoffman was the intern chief, but she has a rap sheet too. I know that might hurt a lot of the ears of black folks who love her dearly, but hey, I can't save your sacred cows in order to damage our folks. A lot of the problems that we have is black folks got favors with certain white folks that hate other black people. And so we can't keep saving these folks and then sacrificing our leaders and then saying we're making progress. So, Sister Gillespie, we're not going to allow them. And it's me and Brother Nick talking today, but there's many other people to come right after us. We're not going to allow them to besmirch this sister's name, because I'll tell you, when with 12 Watch, when we had questions about the police force and getting information, we called that office. We got Sister Gillespie. She got her team. We had a meeting, and she came directly with us with all the information that we needed. That's what her role was supposed to be. And so we can't continue to allow them to get rid of people who are doing the people's work in order to do their work. And RT Ryback, can you please come from behind the shadows? Since this is your puppet we're dealing with, maybe we need to talk to RT a little bit more versus talking to Jacob Fry. That's part of the problem. We have an immature mayor along with an immature city council.
Some people might not know who RT Ryback is. Take us back for a second.
RT Ryback, the former mayor of Minneapolis, who once was stated as that he was going to choose the leadership for Black Minneapolis residents. And if you look at what Jacob Fry is currently trying to do, he's trying to choose our leadership. Black leaders, don't fall for the little dollars and trinkets that they're giving you. This is very bad what we're seeing. And if we sit back and we say nothing, we are complicit along with Jacob Fry and his team.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane, talking to Thomas Berry. You just heard him, CEO of 12 Watch app, and Nick Muhammad, an American citizen, he says, but also principal in the Black Civic Network. Nick, jump in there. What about this? And before you do, thanks to Jasmine Clopton and to viewer, listener Kells, and again to Cameron for high-signing or endorsing the comments that you all are making right now. And Kel says, thank you, Brother Thomas. It needed to be said. So thank you, Kels, for making that comment as well.
Oh, that's the champion, Sister Khalees Houston. Shout out to that sister. You got to have her on the show to talk about the African American Family Preservation Act.
Absolutely.
Organizer will make it happen.
Yeah, right on.
Okay, Nick, go ahead.
So in addition to what Brother Thomas is pointing out, I think one of the main things that the city council has an opportunity to do at this moment. Right now, what just happened with Sister Gillespie and Brother John Jeffries is a step backwards. And the question is, what kind of future do you all want to see for the city of Minneapolis? Are we trying to regress or progress? And this is one of those defining moments. All too often, they take the people who are capable of pushing the city forward because they're not willing to let people who are comfortable with the status quo be comfortable. That's the legacy of Alberder Gillespie. That's who they appointed into that position. That's why she was highlighted and sent and selected by the mayor when she was selected. It was that credibility that brought her into that space. And when she began to do exactly what they hired her to do, everything was fine until some of the ire turned towards some of the, as Thomas pointed out, immature policies set forth by the mayor and some of the city council, and she didn't go along to get along. She was looking towards the future as she was supposed to, looking to actually produce real results that lead us towards real equitable outcomes that have real-time impact. And to get rid of her says more about who we've elected into these positions and these seats and where they want to take the city. And this is literally what we have to get away from. because at the end of the day, we don't have too many people who are willing to put their integrity, their livelihoods on the line once they get into these positions. Usually they become comfortable, complacent, and they go along, as we like to say, to get along. Alberta literally made sure that she opened as many doors of communication between the city and the city of Minneapolis, and more importantly, the people who were impacted by police misconduct the most. I've seen her personally go to the Urban League over North and host meetings directly with new appointees, put them directly in front of community members who literally otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to give their feedback, perspective, and impact. She made sure that happened, and that's what we think about when we think of civil rights. So for them to get rid of her, and then the person who sends her off grew up in Blue Earth, Minnesota, sharpened her teeth as a legislator, and didn't have to touch anything that had anything to do with race, hasn't led any charges when it comes to any type of racial equity reform whatsoever. So how in the world is she qualified to even tie the shoelaces of Alberder Gillespie, let alone untie them and remove her from office as if she's a better selection? And then they appoint her as the interim, as if she is qualified to handle and has a sophisticated understanding of racial dynamics and the lack thereof within the city. That's a huge step backwards.
They might as well let Derek Chauvin out of jail and let him run it, because
since we're on a roll, if they're gonna go backwards. Yeah. My apologies, Elder.
No, not a problem. Look, we got a few minutes left. I want you guys to give us a walkthrough. I appreciate the assessment of Minneapolis City Council. We've got also some unique opportunity in St. Paul. And let's take the last few minutes and we'll come back to focus on Alberta, but give us a rundown on what we should be looking about, thinking about, talking about in Minneapolis, in St. Paul, City Council level, but also at the legislature. The legislature reconvened a week and a half ago, short session, but what's in it for us, our people, Black folks, and what do we do to ensure that our interests are directed by us and handled in ways that we approve? What do you think? Nick, I'll start with you.
I can just start with what I have a hand in right now.
Yeah.
As far as the city of Minneapolis, I am a huge advocate for the community safety specialists CSS program that they have running over North, dealing with the NERC community and the fantastic work that they've done in crime prevention. And they have a model over there that I think is severely underrepresented, but I'd like to see the city close the loop on funding and things that they've made public announcements about.
Which program? Which program?
Community Safety Specialist, CSS.
Okay.
With
where's it operating from?
That's out of the Neighborhood Residence Redevelopment Council, I believe, over North off of Golden Valley Road. And,
okay.
Right next to Shiloh.
Sure.
And then as far as the city of St. Paul, I've been working with in collaboration with Brother Traherne and the Reparations Council that the city has finally got going. We had some hiccups with the city liaison, and they're supposed to be announcing who the new city liaison is with the commission. I'm looking forward to getting the city of St. Paul's infrastructure built on a real reparations movement. As far as the state level, there's two initiatives that Black Civic Network will be continuing to throw its support behind. Chief amongst those is the African American Family Preservation Act with Sister Khalees Houston, but also the ADOS Reparative Justice Fund. And on a state level, we think that that's something that we really need to have a more sophisticated conversation about. In fact, tomorrow I'll be a part of a regional reparations discussion out in Bloomington with some of the St. Paul City Council and a few other reparations workers across the region. So Milwaukee, St. Paul, Minneapolis, Evanston, Illinois, a few of us will all be in Bloomington tomorrow to have a robust discussion. But those are three things that we're working on a municipal to a state level.
Thomas Berry.
Well, my thing is 12 watts. Because of what we're seeing with the city, with the Civil Rights Department, this is what Sister Gillespie was helping us out. We as citizens have to be able to monitor the police department, because if we're not monitoring those officers who are constantly violating citizens' rights, they're going to continue to do what they do. We create a database. We also have it to where citizens are able to record their interactions. And we're telling everyone, go to 12watchapp.com, sign up today, get an early subscription, become Join the movement. The other thing that's important to me, as Brother Nick said, is the African American Family Preservation Act, as well as the Reparative Justice Bill. But let me speak on this African American Family Preservation Act. Child protection services are taking children out of the home at a rate that is so fast that we're not reproducing those children to replace them. They're charted to kind of cover and hide African American children that are being removed. Part of the problem is that they are changing the classification of what we once called Black children. If you have a Black father and a white mother, then you are considered as multiracial, so you're not falling in the Black category anymore. If you have a Black father or a Black mother and a Native American father or mother, now you are followed in the Native American tab, and they're not considered as Black. However, the results are still the same for our community, and in some instances, they're using the children, if they have parents who've passed away, they're using their Social Security to pay for their out-of-home placement. These things have to stop. This is akin to slavery. It's slavery by a different name. And if you want a rate or idea to know the projection of what's going to happen, 70% of the children that are in juvenile detention centers in the Twin Cities right now are former fosters of the state. That's something that we have to have a conversation with. And so to me, I feel like there's a lot of things that we need to do. So, hold on a second. I'm reading this comment that somebody was talking about Margaret Keller.
You go ahead and read it. That's Ellie Wickstrom. Hey, Ellie, thank you for listening. Let me read it.
Yes,
you
sir.
Put it up too. It says Margaret Anderson Keller was in charge of the Public Works Department and the $35 million mess of Bryant Avenue Street updates, plus another $1.7 million to correct mistakes. And she was promoted to be Mayor Fry's director of most city departments after an apology. So there we go.
So you see when they fail up.
Mm-hmm.
And they fell up.
Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you, Ellie, because these are the things that we need to know. And if you are, and here's the sad part about it, it'd be your own folks that would be restating what Jacob Fry stated about Sister Gillespie. But the reality of it is, if you really know this sister and you know her work, you know she is not going to stand in block reform. She's all about reform in every stat, in every way that's going to better our people. So all we're asking for is better government. But since they won't give us that, that's why we're creating 12 Watch, so that we can make sure that we don't have to deal with the Jacob Frys of the world. We as the community can create the data. We can also own the data, and there's nothing that they can do about it. I set this up in a way that to make sure that they don't have any access to block us, and we'll be on every corner at every turn, making sure we keep an eye on them, because as we see, they can't police themselves.
12 Watch app then is what?
Yes, 12watchapp.com is the name of the if you go to www.12watchapp.com and sign up today. We want people to really be able to take the police back into their hands. And thank you, sir, for bringing us on, because my main thing and my main mission is to make sure that we don't have any more George Floyds. But if we don't have the Alberder Gillespies in charge in places like the Civil Rights Department, we're going to continue to struggle time and time again until we get it right.
Can I add one thing for Brother Thomas? Because
please go ahead.
The brilliance of his app can't be underrated. One of the biggest problems that the city of Minneapolis in particular is facing is the transparency of who we're bringing into these critical roles to engage with the public. That app actually puts that power directly into the hands of Minneapolis citizenry. So the next time someone was to get pulled over, they would actually know exactly who it is that is stopping them. And more importantly, they would notify other family members of that particular stop in real time. That would literally put the power of making sure that we have a record of who the police are around us and patrolling us at any given time. And if you're a police officer, it puts you in a position where if you don't have a bunch of dirt on your track record and you're a stellar officer, you begin to be distinguished because your markings inside of that app would demonstrate that you're not of the same as Officer XYZ. So particularly Minneapolis is a very peculiar testing ground for that kind of app. And I think they should take advantage of that because it's a way to build public trust that's already been tarnished and violated time after time after time. And more importantly, it looks like they have a problem taking thought leadership from the very people that, you know, are impacted the most. And that's the most dangerous thing about these events that we're seeing.
Brothers, we're out of time. What a wonderful program. And Brother Barry, let's figure out how to keep bringing the opportunity to join on a regular basis. I think what you're doing is a novel and important work and a game changer. I'm Al McFarlane. Thank you all for listening and watching. Thank you, Nick Muhammad. Thank you, Thomas Berry. Thanks to my colleague, W.D. Foster Graham, and Brother J. Darnell Johnson. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you next time.